Welcome to the Conduit Deeper podcast, a podcast that takes a deep dive into the details that surround our current sermon series, from current events to fascinating finds to conversations that take us deeper into the Word. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to the Deeper Podcast. My name is Mo, Executive Pastor at Conduit Church, joined with our lead pastor, Darren Tyler, for what is a continuation of our Genesis series, the deeper version of that, the Gospel According to God, Chapter 4. You did it in a week, right?
I feel like I did it in a week.
I think you covered it in a week. So? I mean, I think we're on a roll. I don't know how long this is going to continue. I mean, we did it backwards. I mean, I knocked out Chapter 5.
Is that still bothering you?
It does. It bothers me that it's out of order, but no one else cares. And then we're back to Chapter 4. I think we knocked it out in a week. Heading to Chapter 6. I don't know that we're going to get that done in a week.
No. No. I mean, that's kind of why I felt like I needed to get 4 done, because we're headed into the deep end of the pool.
The deep end of the deep end.
Yeah, the even deeper end of the pool.
Yeah.
But it was the Cain and Abel thing is this famous. I mean, almost everybody knows it as far as the story itself. So I didn't feel like I needed to kind of rehash the overarching story of it. But at the same time, we could easily have spent weeks in that area, including, who are all these extra people on the earth that he's, who are these people that they're having sex with, that they're, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of questions behind the questions.
Yes.
And they're all worth asking, and the answer to all of them are, I don't know, other than what the Scripture is telling us. And if it didn't tell us, then maybe we don't need to know. But, when you look at, we joke now like cousins marrying cousins and, Arkansas, but I mean, that's how ancient history was, that you lived in a clan, you married into the family, and we look at that as like, gross. But there's a lot of cultural underpinnings of it. That the closest I can come to trying to explain it is, if I go to Haiti, they eat cats in Haiti, okay? And they think they're delicious.
Oh my!
And I'll give you, they're a little stringier than you want them to be.
Oh no!
But you ask about eating a dog, and they're like, oh, like they look at you like you're from Neptune. You go to West Africa, and they're eating dogs, which is like chicken with hair in it. Like you find you're like picking wiry hair out of your teeth. But you ask them about eating cats, and they look at you like you're from Neptune. You come to America, and you're eating a pig, and the West Africans make a compelling case for why they don't eat pigs, because they're gross.
I don't know, man. I had several slices of bacon this morning, and I feel very confident that was a good decision.
Exactly, and that's my point, because it's delicious if you get the mental thing out of it. That's this cultural thing attached to it. And so Adam living 900 years, there's lots of babies being born. It says they multiplied, not that they added, right? And so, and at the same token, it's not like when you think, oh, he went to the city and the city was this. Like, we think city like New York. That's not what a city looked like in that era. But at the end of it all, the story itself is about, 2 brothers, one who was operating out of bitterness and the other who was operating out of betterness. And that's the story that still applies today.
Do you have brothers?
3.
3 brothers. Where are you on the pecking order?
I am second to the oldest.
Okay.
Got 2 younger and 1 older.
So did y'all fuss a lot? Were you guys fighting?
Oh, yeah. 4 boys in the same house. The amount of testosterone going on in there, like my poor mother, no wonder she died at 61 just from testosterone overflow. Like it'd be like lead poisoning, but with testosterone.
Like classic fights in the kitchen over, give me the milk, and you who ate my thing, and like I can just imagine what the 4 boys in Nebraska were fussing over on a daily basis.
Oh yeah, there were holes in the walls of our rooms, being shoved through walls, like,
oh man, like WWF style back in the day.
Well, actually, then that was a whole other one, which is we set up like I mean, I was 9 years old when we got WTBS out of Atlanta, and they had pro wrestling, and we
Changed your life.
We drug a mattress up into our version of a bonus room, I guess. And yeah, we did pro wrestling up there, like pile drivers, and figure fours, and that was fun fighting. Like when we were, but yeah,
Right.
when it came to fighting, yeah, we came to blows. Like nobody was stabbing each other with forks. Like there were families that,
Oh my.
in my neighborhood anyway, that did that. Like, hey, what happened? Yeah, my brother stabbed me with a fork.
Yeah, that's
like,
not good.
Like a dinner fork, like a dessert fork. It was like shortened. Did the Teeman boys stab each other?
No, I mean, we fussed. I can't remember ever getting into into fisticuffs with my brother. I don't think
Really?
so. We would wrestle, I mean, for sure.
So you've never punched your brother?
I mean, maybe on the arm or on the leg or something, but we never just went full blows.
Interesting. I just thought that was a given. Did your boys fight each other? Did you ever punch Gabe, Micah?
No, never to
Not in
the
the
face.
face.
They were always wrestling and rolling around and maybe some punches to the gut and to the ribs or to the leg or something, but never to the face.
We always started with punching and then ended with wrestling, which for me, that was important. My ground game was strong.
Yeah. Low man wins.
Yeah, but my standing up and punching each other is what you do in a boxing ring. That's not how you win a fight. That's how you get the crap beat out of you in the real world. You don't.
My brother used to get me in trouble all the time. He would frame me. So we would be on a road trip and my brother would hit himself, slap his arm and then say my name, stop it, stop hitting me. But he's hitting himself.
That's devious.
Oh my gosh. And 100% of the time I would get in trouble for it. My name would get called out. Stop it. You knock it off. Leave your brother alone. And my brother's giggling in the seat next to me. This grin on his face.
Martin Teeman, stop hitting your brother.
Yes.
So
he's
your brother's younger?
2 years.
2 years younger. So is he Cain?
Well, maybe.
Maybe. I mean,
Maybe.
that's pretty Cain-like right there, man.
Devious. But that's just it. This Cain and Abel, these two brothers, they begin obviously fighting. Picked a fight a little bit here. It's hard. There's not a ton of detail. And I think if I'm being honest, I'm frustrated with Moses on how he wrote this story. It's lacking detail.
Yeah.
Now, there were sacrifices made or brought, sacrifice isn't the right word, offerings brought to the Lord. One was from the ground, perhaps a farmer, and the other was a sacrifice. But it doesn't say specifically that which one was actually required.
Yeah, because neither were. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is no commandment prior to this about bringing a sacrifice or an offering. And when you look at Cain's, it doesn't say that he made a sacrifice. It says that he brought fat portions of it. So, and I don't know if that means it was he had a good ribeye and he just cut the fat off like I do and brought that to the Lord, and he just
Abel.
gave him, wait, what did I say? Abel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and brought the fat, got him backwards. I'm already messing it up. And just brought the fat portions from the ribeye, which is not the best sacrifice when you think about it. My dogs love it. It's a little piece of fat from a ribeye, and it's literally they have gone to heaven. But point is that there was no command for a sacrifice. And as is always the case with the Bible, let the Bible interpret the Bible, which is why we went to Hebrews 11:4, because it isn't this is a thus saith the Darren. It seems to me it is not about the actual sacrifice. Here, it was about the intention of the sacrifice, of the offering. And it says that Cain or Abel made his by faith.
Yeah.
And it's that simple, that it was about a response to salvation, not a means of earning salvation.
The posture of the heart.
Yeah. Which is, that's the whole, even the sacrificial system, God talking about, you've brought the sacrifices. I didn't desire that. What I desired was your heart with it. And for any of us, if we're bringing any kind of an offering to the Lord in order to get something out of him, that's why you will never hear me teaching a message or a podcast, whatever, to give just so you can get. I mean, that's the prosperity gospel in a nutshell. And it immediately puts you in a position of trying to earn something from God instead of receive something from God. Like I'm making a transaction.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about that before, this idea of transactional theology versus transformational theology.
Yeah.
And I think some of us, depending on what denomination we grew up in, was very transactional.
Yeah.
It's the do's and the don'ts, which equal, blessing or cursing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the core of why when you see televangelists talk about, give $1,000 seed and God can bless you. And they'll even go so far. I remember Oral Roberts or Benny Hinn over the years, you can name your seed.
Man.
Like, I need a new house, so here's my $1,000 vow. And if I do this, then I will get the house or whatever it is. So I've now named my seed. And having grown up in and around the Tulsa world, I began to notice something pretty specific, and it was the only one the prosperity gospel seemed to be working for were the ones preaching it, because they were the ones getting the $1,000 seed. And so many of my friends were still driving, including me, our beat up old cars, holding on, but because it was never meant to be. And by the way, the idea of seed time and harvest, that's an Old Testament idea, and they've attached it to God loves a cheerful giver. Anyway, there's a lot of underpinning scripture that if you torture it enough, you can make it say that. But at the end of the day, not only is it inaccurate, it makes you either bitter or, many times it turns you away from God altogether because I didn't get what I deserved. The idea that I've done all this for him and my life is still terrible. There's a bitterness in that. And that's what's coming through in Cain is a spirit, not a literal spirit, but the spirit of the idea of that's where the ideology ends. It's the logical conclusion of that ideology is one of two things, actually. One is you actually happen to be a really good businessman and you get rich. So you continue to, well, this clearly worked for me. It had nothing to do with the fact that you're a really good business woman or man. And the other is, from my background, which was, we're just broke and we just keep giving and never, for me anyway, I never experienced any sort of windfall of money. And
Sure.
and we've had conversations. I remember, people from our church family, my own family, that I've done all this for God and I'm still not getting the quote unquote breakthrough from it. And if that's your attitude, which has been mine in times in life, that's Cain's attitude. It's not Abel's attitude. Abel's attitude is, here's my offering. I'm so grateful for what you did for me. Here's this offering. And if I don't get anything else from you ever, this is great. I woke up 6 feet above ground. I woke up in relationship with you. That's everything. I think the language, I can't remember which prophet, talking about Jesus, he is our portion. God is our portion. It's like and anything else is gravy from the portion. And Cain didn't understand that, or rephrase that, chose to rebel against that. And Abel, it cost him his physical life, but it gained him a name for eternity. It gained him, to this day, thousands of years later, we still speak of Abel with a sense of honor and awe and respect. And we speak of Cain with a sense of disgust. And maybe Cain he might have won the first one, but Abel won the eternal one.
You think Cain meant to kill Abel?
Oh, 100%.
You think it was intentional, or they started fighting, they were getting after it?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it was like, oh no, what have I done?
It feels, well, the language around it it's premeditated. You have to read into it a little bit, but why are you angry? Why are you downcast? Now Cain said, let's go out to the field, this is verse 8. And while they're in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him.
It's it reminds me of a conversation you had in school, meet me at the bike rack.
Oh yeah. Did you ever have
school?
Did you have those?
No.
Good Lord.
I stayed out of trouble. I just stayed out of trouble.
That's actually really fascinating to me.
Really?
Did you not fight at all? Nobody, I'm not not making fun of you or anything. I'm just fascinated.
I've never been in a fist fight.
Ever?
No.
You've never been punched?
I was punched one time.
By Jen?
Oh, for sure. And your wife, honestly, she gives out punches all the time. stay away from her right hook. And I mean, I don't know. I just stayed out of trouble. I don't know.
That's really interesting.
Do I seem like an agitator?
No, I mean, you're not giving off like hillbilly vibes or anything, but that was the world we grew up in. Like we were just
not scrap
fighting all the time. Like it was.
I was too afraid of the punishment I was going to get when I went home if I started fighting in the schoolyard.
Maybe that's the difference. Like my dad was like, "Well, did you kick his?
Right.
You know what?
Right.
Or what did you do to deserve that? I remember the time I got the absolute fire beat out of me, and that was my dad's first question. Was, well, you must have done something, to deserve it. And
but yeah, it just seems like Cain is like, I don't know. It's a little bit of like, hey, let's meet at the bike rack after school. We got to settle this. But did he intend to truly take out his brother, or did it just go sideways?
I mean, you'd have to extrapolate motives. The language is very specific that he went there and attacked him and killed him. Like it doesn't seem to leave room for any kind of that was an accident. And by the way, he doesn't say it was an accident either. If it were, and I didn't mean to, and it just escalated, like he didn't say any of that. It was, if nothing else, a lesson. Like one thing that I suppose would be frustrating for me when I read this is we don't know how much time passed between the time God said you're bitter and you're downcast and just the next verse. So that could have been a day, a minute, or 100 years. Like we just don't know how much time passed. But what we do know is that bitterness it's the language we were using on Sunday, is a lion, it's a predator that's hiding outside your door. And bitterness is such a great picture because if you let it in, you let that lion in, bitterness eats you up, inside out. And we all know it. We all know somebody. You might be that somebody, but we all know somebody that's I'm a victim, I'm bitter, I can't let go of this, I don't know why I can't, as if forgiveness isn't a choice. And you let that grow inside of you long enough, and it will eat you up inside. Bitter is not an attractive, even just in a day-to-day walk, it's not, and nobody wants to hang around with bitter people. And the internet has just created, it's like a bitter theme park, misery theme park. We just add a new ride. Well, I'm bitter about this now, I'm bitter about that. And it eats from the inside out, and that's what happened with Cain. And I'm not saying that everybody that's bitter ends up being a murderer, but you do murder people's character with bitterness. Like you assassinate with impugning their character. I think about some things that have happened to me over the years in bitterness, where someone. Let's talk about it. We had a family at our church. It's been a long time ago, and if you're listening to this, you don't know who they are, so don't stop trying. They were angry at an employer that I happened to be a friend of, and they came to the office to tell me who my friend really is. And I remember even asking him, like, "What do you want me to do about this exactly?" And they didn't know, other than they wanted me to cut off all friendship, and if I wouldn't, then they were going to leave the church. I'm like, "Well, I'm sorry, Godspeed to you." But the way they recounted the meeting, and I'm trying not to give any details, I don't want to give any of this away, but the way they recounted the meeting online, Twitter, is 100% not how it happened. They said that I said things that I didn't say, that I did things that I didn't do. And by the way, these are lovely human beings. They love Jesus. They're raising their children, but their lives are now defined by the bitterness. Even if what they said was accurate, their lives became so miserable and bitter. And you can watch it happen online. You can kind of watch somebody's online presence shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink because nobody wants to be around it. And then you're afraid, because if they're going to be bitter, eventually you run out of people to crucify. So you start crucifying the people even around you, which is what bitterness leads to. And so you're impugning character, you're impugning their reputation, their name. So you may not murder them physically, but you're murdering them socially. And bearing false witness is very specific, is one of the top 10 of don't do.
In verse 15, it says, "The Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him." What does that mark look like, you think?
Oh, I don't know. And I don't think I mean, if anybody says they do, they don't. Because if I'm right, it doesn't say where the mark is. It must have been visible because everybody that sees it will know. So there's an idea that it's probably on his head. But
so interesting.
Yeah.
Like, what was that mark that was so obvious that they knew when they saw it?
Don't do this, yeah.
Well, when they knew they saw him, that they should attack him, it says. Anyone who found him would attack him if they saw the mark. That's
what
crazy.
verse are you in?
Verse 15?
Oh, I've got Post-it notes over it. All this technology, and I still preach with Post-it notes. This is what a sermon looks like for me on a Sunday. I like it. All this technology available, and here I am.
He caused him to flee. He got the heck out of Dodge. Verse 16, then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden.
No, so it says that the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him.
So that no one would find. See, this is what I get for reading the KJV, ESV.
What is that?
Lest anyone who found him should attack him.
Got it. Yeah, so it's basically, if anybody finds him, this is a mark. It's actually a weird thing to say, but it's like a mercy. It's a mark of mercy on Cain. Because vengeance is an eye for an eye, right? That's what we talk about. So a life for a life. And here's God putting mercy on Cain for whatever reason on Cain and giving him another chance with it. And of course, we read later that Cain squandered that chance.
What version do you have, NIV?
Yeah, the nearly inspired version.
Yeah, I need to look at that verse in a couple different versions. I don't have it access to it right now.
Yeah, the underlying tone is that people would want to kill him and attack him, and whether it's amplified, I think even message, that's the idea, is that they're going to want to kill you, they're going to want to attack you, and they're going to want to kill you, but I'm not going to let them, and here's a mark that's going to save your life. And then he still has to wander. He still has to, the ground is a special curse on him. He's not going to be able to farm the way he used to farm. The ground is not going to give up what it used to give up. And that's a great lesson, that God's mercy on the penalty of our sin is so enormous in grace, but the consequences of our sin are still there. I mean, I've done things, said things that I know I'm forgiven. I know that I'm righteous in the eyes of God. And those people that I did it to, there are still consequences in relationships, and vice versa. That I know God has forgiven that person that did this to me, but I don't want to be around them with it. And I forgive them. I'm not going to let it take up real estate in my brain for bitterness, but there's a consequence of it. And, our jails are full of men and women who have come to Christ and have been forgiven and redeemed, and they still need to, pay their debt to society, so to speak, which is a consequence of sin. And that's what happens to Cain. He's got a consequence of his sin that has made his life miserable. Bitterness is a lion that wants to destroy you, and you have a choice. And I love that we skipped over it here, but God said to them, verse 7, it's a predator crouching outside your door. It wants to have you, but you must rule over it. So there is a way. We can rule over it. I am not a victim. It's my choice whether I'm going to be bitter or not. It's 100% a choice. And anybody that tells you any differently is probably bitter themselves and just trying to find a justification for it.
Yeah, I mean, Paul talks about it a lot in the New Testament, feeding the flesh or feeding the spirit.
Yep.
I mean, you have a decision to make each and every day.
Yeah.
Talks about it a lot in Romans chapter 8. The spirit warring against the flesh and the flesh warring against the spirit, and what attention we can give to it, dominion that we have over it.
Yeah.
So it's encouraging.
Yeah.
To know that we have that power.
And the theory, I think that I talked about it a little bit on Sunday. I didn't talk about it in first service because I was watching the clock. But in Mere Christianity, which if you've never read Mere Christianity, one of the finest, most comprehensive theological undertakings, it's just really fantastic. But he talks at one point in there about big sin or small sin, but what he was referring to was it's not so much about the behavior as the mark on your soul that it leaves behind, that it leaves a mark on your soul. And I don't know that he took this from God marking Cain, but there is a mark. It's a mark that says, yeah, I did this. This was my past. This is like, a dent in you. I don't know how else to say it. Like maybe that's it. Maybe that's the thing. It's like I've dented my wife's car because I did something really stupid. I backed into something I wasn't watching, but there's a mark left behind. She still drives it, still loves me, but there's a mark because of my stupidity.
Yeah. In verse 9, he asks, where is Abel? He asks Cain, where is Abel? He also asked that in verse 9 of chapter 3. So chapter 3, Genesis 3:9, he asks, where are you, Adam? One chapter later, chapter 4, verse 9, also verse 9. Hey, Cain, where's Abel? I just think it's interesting that God's asking where these people are, clearly knowing where they are.
Yeah.
But he gives them an opportunity to maybe confess, for confession.
Which, in therapy, is half the therapist, maybe 100% of the therapist's job, is to get you to say out loud that there's power in me admitting like the truth about myself.
Yeah.
So when God asks a question for that, it's actually like, I don't want to say doing therapy because that really diminishes what he's doing here, but it's the same principle. Cain, I need you to say it. What have you done? I need you to say it yourself. I did this. And it's funny because in humanity, like you can listen, the next time you hear interviews, you hear somebody talking about something that they did or something that happened to them, and they will almost always start switching to a third person. And when you're in a situation like that, you do this and you do that. But what they're trying to say is, I did this and I did that, but they have to disassociate themselves from it, so they can start using third person pronouns because it subconsciously distances themselves from their own behavior. And God doesn't really have any room for that. Like the truth, biblical humility, believing the truth about myself. I did this. Here's where I am, and I love it that, God asks Cain a question and he answers with a question. Am I my brother's keeper? He doesn't answer with a question or with an answer. He answers with a question. And
kind of sarcastic, if I might add.
Seemingly, yeah. But if you're in a counseling situation, you start going down that road, and you and I both sat, across the table from people making terrible decisions with their lives, and you can almost immediately know, okay, where they are just based on what they say. And if they're answering questions with questions or combative, which this feels combative to me, that he's clearly not there. The bitterness is what's answering, not God's grace is answering at him. There's straight bitterness. Am I my brother's keeper?
Yeah. If you're watching this, I want to make sure that you know that we are grateful that you are, especially on YouTube. We have launched this over the past 6 months on YouTube. And so those of you that are watching on YouTube, thank you. And be sure to like and subscribe our channel as this is growing, as this is getting out outside of just here in Nashville. And folks are watching from all over the country and from all over the world. So thank you. But be sure to like and subscribe. That really helps push things up. And if you're listening, also, feel free to leave a review. Leave a 5-star on Apple Music and or Spotify. Again, that helps push things up in the algorithms and allows more folks to find it. So we just wanted to say a quick thank you. Then also, kind of the second half of this podcast, I want to dive into, there's no real segue, so we're just going to acknowledge that there isn't one because that'll be the segue. We need to talk about what's happening across the world in college campuses, and maybe we can somehow tie this in. Maybe it's a bitter.
Well, we can because of the bitterness.
Maybe it's the bitterness.
This is the logical conclusion of bitterness.
Yeah. So if you're not paying attention, college campuses across the country are experiencing what they want to call protests, pro-Palestinian protests. They are more than that. They've become violent. They have become camps. They are actually Gaza encampments is what they're wanting to call them.
Jeez.
So these are pro-Palestinian, well, let's call it what it really is, anti-Israel riots that are happening in college campuses. As of this morning, 84 universities, 75 in the U.S. and 9 in other countries that are starting.
Does it say which of the countries?
United Kingdom.
Yeah, so Britain, like Western.
Yep. France, Australia and Canada.
Yeah.
There's one in Australia and Sydney.
Yeah. Notice where they're not happening. Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. Middle East.
Iran. Yeah, they're not.
And these are I mean, go check. I don't watch mainstream media anymore, and I haven't for years. So I'm not sure exactly what they're showing or what they are reporting, for lack of a better word. But these things are wild. So UCLA last night got way out of hand. I mean, violent. I mean, like, I think they said it was about an hour of total anarchy and melee. No guns were fired, but they're using.
Of course not. They're liberals. They don't have guns. That's one of the ways you know we're going to be okay. Like if the transgenders come after us, what are you going to punch me? Like
right.
When you're anti-gun but pro like killing Darren, like what are you going to kill me with? Like you know. But anyway, like
fireworks. They're shooting fireworks at each other.
It's so sorry. They're really shooting fireworks.
Yeah, they're shooting fireworks at each other, and then the campus police came in and were shooting like rubber bullets, and the protesters were using umbrellas to shield themselves from rubber bullets that they found out did not work very well.
I'm not even what to say about this. Like they're shooting fireworks. Like it's like that's their version of violence. Like if they had any skills whatsoever, I'm sure they would do way more than that. But they did. Like, shooting some bottle rockets. Like that's what we did when I was. You talk about brothers fighting. I have scars on my chest still.
Shooting bottle rockets at each other.
Roman candles. Did you ever do Roman candle wars? Dude, you get hit with a direct hit from a Roman candle. It'll leave a mark on you.
There's a mark.
I've got one here and I got one here. I got hit with a point blank. But so on these campuses, is there any indication in what you're seeing percentage-wise that are Muslim/Arabic versus blue hair woke people?
Oh man, it's hard to tell because they are wrapping themselves. I mean, they're wearing masks, which is so 2020. But they're wearing the.
It's so 2020.
What's the? I don't want to call it the wrong thing that the Arabs wear around their head, like a
burqa,
the scarf.
Yeah, but
like the. Like the men are wearing them too, like the scarves that are around their head. So they're covering themselves up.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to tell. So for example, 70 people were arrested at the University of Texas in Austin on Monday for one of these Gaza camp riots.
In Texas, huh?
Austin, Texas.
Oh, Austin, never mind. That's not really Texas.
And 46 of them were not students of the school. So
wait, so say that number again. 46 are not students. There were 70 total?
70 arrested. 46 were not even students. And people don't know where these people are coming from. Like, are they being busted? Well, the question is, yes, they are being busted to different locations. Like, people are getting off of buses dressed in all of this garb. They can't tell immediately if they are American or not, or if they are Muslim or not.
Interesting.
It's very confusing time, but it is at a fever pitch. So Portland State, of course,
Oregon.
They've created on the campus. There's a Gaza Autonomous Zone that they've named it. Remember back in 2020, it was called they called it Chaz.
Yeah, it was Antifa, right?
Yeah. I forget what the CHAZ stand for. Autonomous Zone, I can't remember what it was stood for, but they took over the library building on campus and they have completely desecrated it, like spray painted every single thing. I mean, it looks like a third world country. It's a total disaster, but these are popping up everywhere. What is it? 75 different universities right now across the country.
Wow.
And it's May, which tells me we're on the precipice of a summer of something.
Yeah, I mean, with an election coming up, clearly both sides are already charged with energy, but
there's a riot. Well, maybe it will turn into a riot. There's a protest plan for Nashville tonight, by the way.
Do you know where?
Centennial Park, 5:30. May 1st, Centennial Park. The Vanderbilt Divest Coalition is holding a rally and a march in solidarity.
Are these the same people that took over the Vanderbilt office, registration office, whatever, and held it cupped? What's baffling to me is if you or I go to an abortion clinic with a group of people and decide we're going to camp there because we don't want any more children being murdered, we would, and because it happens all the time, would be arrested. In fact, there's a pastor from Tennessee who's been, charged and sentenced. Kevin Kukaji sent us information on him, and I'm totally spacing his name, and I feel terrible about that. But the guy has been arrested for doing significantly less than what these guys are doing on this campus. So if you're looking for the hypocrisy in it, it's so bald-faced, hypocritical that students at a private university could just take over and destroy. And people that are not even students, right? Which you pointed out, like there's a percentage in all these campuses now that are being sent there, and there's evidence that like every time we've seen these protests happening, that there's evidence that they're being paid to do this. Even if it's not a salary, at least their daily expenses are being met financially by somebody because they don't have any money or jobs for that matter. But I'll tell you what's maddening, and I've referenced it here before, but it's worth saying that, this is specifically aimed, if you're looking for, is there a demonic underpinning of this? Is there like a spirit of darkness with it? The total number of casualties so far in the Gaza war are 33,000, and everyone's a tragedy because it is a tragedy. And I was having a conversation with a friend who is a pastor, by the way, and he's saying, and I know it's kind of complicated. No, it's not complicated. Like I appreciate what you're saying there. But just inside of Israel alone, this is something I know I've shared before. This was a stat that Douglas Murray shared, but it's worth repeating, that if you add up the number of people killed on both sides of the Israel-Palestinian conflict since 1948 till today, and you include the highest estimated death toll, the highest, so given some credit, like maybe it's higher than we think, you're still getting less than what was happening in a month killing in Syria during the last decade. And not a darn one of them were protesting that. Just this year alone in northern Nigeria, tens of thousands of Christians are being killed by radical jihadists, and not a single one of these guys can be bothered to even tweet about it, let alone get up and protest for it. And, going back to the bitterness thread, when you hear what's happening, especially in woke ideology, it's an identity and it's my identity. I'm creating myself in my image. And if you're not going to acknowledge it, there's a bitterness from it. And so you end up with the logical response to bitterness is illogical behavior. And that's what we're seeing. This is completely illogical. If it was truly about the innocent people of Palestine, and God bless them and we pray for them, but if that's why these university students were protesting, where have they been for the last, and let's say the last 2 years, because I know they're college kids probably, so they're going to say I wasn't alive 20 years ago, but you were alive 5 years ago, you were alive 2 years ago, and you were silent on it. So you're being captured by an ideology, not driven by a passion. It's not the same thing, and it's infuriating. And you wonder what, from our perspective, I mean, again, so the Capitol riots, it's all over the press. They're going to arrest him. They're prosecuting him, imprisoning them, like putting them on trial. And these kids are walking out. I mean, this is what happened in Portland over and over again. Antifa guys, girls would be burning stuff down. They'd arrest them, put them out the next day. They'd burn more stuff down. I mean, I don't have any stats in front of me, but I'm wondering how many of a percentage, or these are the same people from 2 or 3 years ago from the riots that were taking over the nation.
I think it's a large percentage.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is an absolute copy paste of summer of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
We have been talking about something like this rising up this summer and this fall.
Mm-hmm. But there's
right on schedule.
There's a twist in this though that I'm intrigued by. So I don't know if you noticed or saw that Michael Moore, the sloppiest documentarian, just greasy and sloppy, has put a direct challenge to President Biden to withdraw support from this, or Trump is going to win. Like, that's his trump card. And he's behind a movement in Michigan, and I want to say it was 100,000, but there was tens of thousands of people who voted neither in the primary elections because he's not a fan of Biden or of Trump, and he is making a case that this could cost Biden the election because in Michigan, for instance, he has lost the Arab American vote, is what Michael Moore is saying. If you remember Michigan, what was it, 10,000 votes that gave Biden Michigan? So it's not like these are hair-thin margins in an election. And so what's wild to me right now, and I'm 53, so I've surely not seen as much life as many people have, but I've never seen anything like what we have right now, where you've got on one hand, you got Robert F. Kennedy, who is polling at 8 to 10%. That's the closest I can remember is Ross Perot.
It's a chunk.
So you got that variable. And I actually believe, I know the Democrats are freaking out, but I think he's going to pull more libertarians than Democrats. So, but be that as it may, you got that as a loop, whatever, a unknown, a variable, a wild card. And on the other hand, you've got the woke corner who hate Biden because of his support for Israel. And I know that people like me wishes that he would support more, but even the tiny bit of support he's given to them is infuriating to the woke corner of the world.
Well, is this why he's coming out and saying his administration is considering bringing Palestinians to the U.S. as refugees?
Oh, golly, yeah. Don't you? I mean,
they've not made a decision on this.
But it's so blatant. But here's the thing. It won't be. That's the problem with the woke ideology. It's never a complete capitulation or nothing. It's a zero-sum game. So, yeah, he's trying to assuage the squad corner of his world.
So, yeah. So CBS reported this week, a couple days ago, that documents show senior officials across several federal U.S. agencies have discussed the practicality of different options to resettle Palestinians from Gaza who have immediate family members in America or are American citizens.
Yeah. And to be utterly clear, there are amazing, God-fearing, normal people inside of Gaza, as there are in the West Bank, as there are at Columbia University, right? We can't define either side by our extremes. But as what we have seen when it comes to the federal government, their ability, willingness, whatever, to vet candidates like that they're not only woefully inadequate, they're non-existent. So we don't know. But again, you talk about the hypocrisy of this. Planes full of Haitians that have made it to the United States, literally fleeing an actual war zone as well, are being flown back at night, U.S. planes, and dumped off at an airport that actually is a war zone. Like the airport, the property surrounding the airport, you're literally dropping them in the middle of a war zone and wishing them best. Whereas here we're saying, well, we want to bring these in. So it would be great if we could help everybody. But the fact that they won't help Haitians but are talking about this, there's no way that's not a political thing. There's not to my knowledge, a single political calculus for Biden that benefits bringing Haitians in the United States. And so he's completely persona non grata on it. But there is obviously a political calculation of bringing in Gazans that to help them. Now, I've noticed in that conversation what you won't hear is Egypt offering to welcome in.
That's what I was going to mention. Egypt is not waving them in, and
no,
neither is any other Middle Eastern country, right?
Yeah, and not a single one of these knuckleheads at the campuses are protesting Egypt. The simple reality is Gaza is not boxed in by Israel. It's boxed in by Israel and Egypt equally, and arguably worse by Egypt, because Israel is at least getting water to them. Israel is why they have water. Israel is why they've had supplies at all. And Egypt is not interested.
This reminds me of, and we've talked about this before, but it's, again, here we are, the Yuri Bezmenov ideological subversion tactic.
Yeah.
And this is an old Russian KGB defector to Canada. If you have a chance, YouTube search this or Google search Yuri Bezmenov and what he talks about in terms of ideological subversion over the course of a generation. And I just feel like this is playing out. It's a 40-year game is what many countries will use this tactic to subvert an ideology in a country. And it's a long play. It's a very long play. It feels like it's playing out exactly like they would have hoped in terms of a communist ideology over the course of a decade.
I love that you said they, because that's a phrase you'll hear often. It's a phrase I will use from time very often as well. They this and they want that, and the question is, who is they?
Yep.
And the answer is not in this realm, but in the unseen realm. Like when you hear the Bible speak of familiar spirits, it's language from Leviticus and Deuteronomy. It's the how do I say that? The feeling you get when you hear the Bible say familiar spirits is, oh, I'm familiar with this. I feel this one. I know that I've experienced this before. It's because it's the same spirit from Yuri Bezmenov. It's the same spirit from Constantine. The same. Like, you can see these threads of spirit throughout history. It's not like we talked about the spirit of Cain. That's not a thing. But there are familiar spirits, like demonic, and we're going to talk somewhat about that in Genesis 6. But the ideology, the ideological capture, what'd you call that? Ideological? I can't remember how to say it. Subversion is 100% something. It's why George Orwell, he wasn't a prophet. He was a historian. He was just identifying what is in the world, and the reason it feels familiar when you read Orwell is, because it's the same spirit that existed then that exists now. And when you think Jesus casting demons into pigs, wasting perfectly good bacon, I might add. But they said, are you going to throw us before our time? Are you going to send us to there's a time coming? And the answer was no. So he cast them into the pigs. There's these bodiless, whatever spirits that existed then that still exist today. They desire to inhabit bodies, which we've seen in Africa and we're starting to see here in America. We were just talking about that yesterday.
Yeah.
But those spirits, there's different levels. There's in this unseen realm. But there's this. Is it Daniel 10? Where the Prince of Persia? The archangel. I tried to get here quicker, but I was withstood by the Prince of Persia. I'm like, we just sort of gloss over that. But there was a Prince of Persia that existed. That was a unseen realm demonic force. That's probably the same one still there. And so you look back over the decades and the millennia and it's the same thing. It might have Islam tapped on top of it now as opposed to Baal, but it's the same familiar spirit. And I think that's exactly what we're experiencing here, which is the ideological capture of a generation, which, again, the illogical behavior of a bunch of kids who have nothing. There's literally no way in this earth that they are affected or would be affected by what's happening in Gaza. But for whatever reason, demonic forces behind it, that's what they're going to make a case for, as opposed to, like I said, they've been silent for a decade on all these other things that have been happening by the same sort of radical jihadists and completely silent. But for some reason with Israel, they're violently angry about it in the UK. They're violently angry in France. Now, keeping in mind, in France is where Charlie Hebdo was murdered for making a cartoon about Muhammad, and he is murdered for it. And now you've still got, nut jobs protesting Israel in support of the same exact ideology that killed Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah. What we were talking about yesterday is what has happened in a couple of American churches over the past month, where it's gone viral, where during a live stream of a church service, they'll have like a prayer moment, which we do on a Sunday, have a prayer moment over the congregation. And the live stream has captured these demonic screams from, in both cases, were female, where it's, again, a time of prayer in the middle of service. The Holy Spirit is moving. and the pastor is teaching or preaching and saying the name of Jesus and praying against certain things, and two different churches on different sides of the country have an individual that is responding with like demonic noises coming out and flailing, and they're having to remove the person, pray over them. I mean, a whole thing happens.
Yeah.
That's not typical for an American church service. But to have two of those happen in the same month, to me says that we're on the brink of some more of that.
The pot has been stirred in the unseen realm. We've talked about it many times, but we go and proclaim the gospel. We're going to do it this summer in South Sudan. There's never been a church here. The name of Jesus has never been declared here, and demons don't care for that at all because it means their reign is over.
Yeah, it was something they had dominion in.
Yeah.
No longer.
Yeah.
Do have a dominion over.
Yeah. And yeah, they're just not happy. They're just not happy about it. In the West, it seems like the strategy of Satan has been to hide behind enlightenment, and we don't even believe in you anymore. So that's part of the strategy seems to have been here, that we'll ideology will subvert you that way, but we're too sophisticated. But at some point, when demons are being poked, I've literally seen it. I don't know how many times now. It always ends the same for the demon, by the way, which is they're gone, and Jesus remains. But I definitely wonder if whatever principalities and powers that are over in our nation, because that's something else, by the way, that they seem to be attached to specific areas and land, so to speak. So that's Deuteronomy 32, the table of nations. Like that was these sons of God, Elohim, were scattered around. So they have, which is why the Prince of Persia, I think it's Revelation 3, where it talks about Satan and where you have your throne, which is actually in modern day Turkey. It's a literal physical location attached to a spiritual force. And so they have those in those areas. There are principalities and powers that are here in the United States that have been here since before Columbus ever arrived. And they're still here, and they're still working. And their work is exactly what happened with Cain, which is to ideologically capture someone with whatever sin crouching, as a predator in the grass, and either destroy themselves or destroy each other and then destroy themselves. But the destruction is what it's all about for the principalities and the powers. They've not tapped out. They've not given up. And, look, I hope we don't, I don't know. Do I hope we do see that in our church? I mean, I hope we don't, because that means that they're demonic forces oppressing or possessing somebody. But on the other hand, I hope we do, because then we can, watching somebody be set free from that stuff, not many people get to see it, but it's amazing.
Does that happen often in Haiti? Have you seen it in Haiti?
Mm-hmm.
I just think of the voodoo culture that they have over there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it doesn't happen like in Africa, because the one thing about Haiti, even though there's a battle between good and evil, light and dark, like Christ's name has been proclaimed there. And so it's almost like, I don't know, this is complete conjecture. It's almost as if that's their first volley, like when you proclaim Jesus, is like the Jiffy Pop demons popping up everywhere. But then after you're not going anywhere, then the battle just changes. So it's not like you have as many demon-possessed people showing up in a church, but they're still there. You go by a voodoo ceremony, there's wild stuff going on in there. Some of it drug-induced, most of it demonically induced. And I've come to believe, again, this is complete conjecture on my part, but people playing around like with ayahuasca, with mind-altering drugs, it almost seems as if whatever those drugs do, they seem to break the barrier between the physical and the spiritual.
Yeah, some sort of gateway
realm, which is why the Bible, the New Testament specifically, warns against pharmakia. It's called witchcraft in the scriptures, the way it's been translated, but it's pharmakia. It's speaking of mind-altering drugs, a specific warning against it. And it's probably why it's appropriately called witchcraft, because it's talking about, if you think witchcraft, you're thinking spirit realm, you're thinking demonic stuff. And so there is, this growing movement right now amongst people using it recreationally that are poking some pretty dangerous places of what could happen to them on the other side.
Well, that actually came up in the news today. Do you see that? About gosh, I got to find the article. U.S. moving to legalize, restate the definition of legalized marijuana across the country. I'm not sure of all the implications of that, but that's interesting. It was a move.
I'll be honest. I'm actually shocked they haven't done that sooner as it relates specifically to marijuana
for medical use.
Yeah. And maybe it would, I don't know. I know just enough about this to be dangerous. So fact check everything I'm about to say. Alcohol, marijuana, like those types of things, they do something to your behavior, to your brain. Almost every meeting I've ever had or somebody I know that has done something incredibly dumb in their marriage or whatever, alcohol was always involved, which is why it's wine is a mocker. Like there's language around that. But it's a different category than like an LSD, ayahuasca, like mind altering. Like those things, like marijuana, and by the way, I'm not making a case for any of these things, but marijuana seems to like mute some of your brain stuff. Ayahuasca seems to rewrite your brain. Like it's moving your neurons around.
Oh, wow.
It's changing.
That's different.
100% different. And there are those who swear by that. Got Marines that they had PTSD and it's different now. Or you'll hear people talk about like they just found God in it. Or a while back, Rogan was interviewing a guy that he believes in reincarnation now because of what happened to him on an ayahuasca.
Wow.
Trip. So they talk about it in the positive. They always, for the most part, skip the negative side, which happens significant amounts of time where genuinely people see things they can't unsee. It scares them in ways they can't unscare because they've poked through into a darkness. Now, is it just mind or is it spirit? I don't know. But when you put the lens of Scripture and why Paul was so adamant about it, that if you're dabbling in that at all, be very, very careful. Prayerfully, be very careful.
Yeah. What it is, the DEA has agreed to move marijuana to a Schedule 3, which allows cannabis to be prescribed by a doctor, paid for by insurance, legally shipped. So that was the move.
So they're moving to the middle. I'm honestly shocked they haven't done that because state by state it's already happening. Mm-hmm. And, look, there are people if you think like from a straight medicinal standpoint, people use plants for medicine all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, I was surprised they hadn't done that. And on the other hand, I'm kind of glad they haven't because what we saw in Oregon when Oregon legalized marijuana was like one of my favorite places in Oregon is Southern Oregon, Medford.
Yeah.
And almost overnight, it just flipped a switch there of a bunch of young people who are broke, homeless. Because if anybody that's used marijuana recreationally at all, it takes all the energy out of you. I mean, it's not a motivating experience.
A very productive group of people.
Yeah. I'm speaking hypothetically, of course. Like I'm not referring to anything I did in Bible college.
There you go.
But you're not exactly the most motivated group on campus if you're the ones burning down a fat one behind the. And so legalizing it, I'm honestly surprised they haven't already. But what I'm aware of is that there's also a genuine movement right now for legalizing like ayahuasca, like LSD, like mind-altering Jerry Garcia, Grateful Dead. I mean, people do right now. There's a place in Kentucky that does this. There's a place in Arizona, Sedona. And I know, I personally know people that have gone to Costa Rica to have these little ayahuasca retreats. And
wow,
it's become mainstream. And boy,
handle with caution.
Very much caution. We went from demon possession to weed to LSD to
that
Israel and
was a wide
Gaza.
swath of topics today.
Yeah, we might need to edit this.
We
Good
are-
luck with this, Micah.
We are all over the place.
But
But
because it's so hot in here, it's like we're doing the podcast in Micah's mouth, just dripping.
give us a quick glimpse before we wrap. Just a little taste.
I don't know that there's a quick taste of
Genesis 6.
Okay, there's two views of Genesis 6.
Okay.
We're going into Genesis 6 where the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fine, which I
would
agree.
assume so.
I love the daughters of men. And there's this two ideas. One is that it's the Sethites. This is the generations of Seth. They are the sons of God, which there are theologians that hold to that. And the problem with that is the language of the scripture. It just doesn't seem to be there. Like the sons of God, the benign Elohim is used throughout the Old Testament of angels, of spiritual forces. And so what we're going to talk, here's the underlying theme. The problem was, it's Jude 1, verse 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. The sin they committed was they abandoned the habitation that they were given and tried to inhabit someplace else. And we'll talk a little bit about, can angels really procreate with humans? We're going to talk about that. We'll probably talk about that more in the deeper. But the point is that at the end of the day, God had a design for family, and God had a design for husband and wife. And whether you're having sex with an angel or your neighbor, you're leaving the habitation that God had for you. And so there is a design for us that when we violate it, the end is terrible. Now, that's probably where we're going to go on Sunday. Well, next week on the deeper, we'll definitely get into. Actually, next week is Joel Mutamali. So we're going to talk about the 3 rebellions. He studied with Michael Heiser, and this is one of those rebellions, is the sons of God rebelling against by infecting and messing up with the DNA of humanity. Yeah. The mighty men. By the way, it's translated giants. This will be a little Easter egg for you. But the word itself doesn't necessarily mean giants. It just mighty men. It speaks of whoever these creatures were. They had, I don't want to say superpowers, but maybe you would say superpowers. So whether it was height or not, there's no indication of that. But what it is an indication of is that they had superhuman type capabilities, and a flood came.
We've got a lot to unpack, and if you made it this far, you were on a journey with us today.
I feel like we need to apologize.
Covered a lot of things, but we're so grateful that you would join us each week. We thank you for the comments. We thank you for those that catch us in the hall on a Sunday and let us know that you're listening. It encourages us to keep going with these. And if you missed this teaching that we're talking about, the Cain and Abel teaching, you can scroll back up, whether you're in a podcast or on YouTube, and watch and or listen. We're just grateful that you would join us on the Deeper podcast each and every week. And we plan to be here again, of course, next week. Thanks.